As we continue to watch this, I turn to Ravi Agrawal. Ravi, you're editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy. You're host of FP Live. You're joining us from New York. Just be aware, as you and I go back and forth, that our viewers will be watching the skies over Gaza, where we've just seen a number of, in rapid succession, bombardments, Israeli bombardments, this in the north of the Gaza Strip. So I have to ask you about diplomacy, because, we've been studying the language coming out of the Blinken diplomatic tour, Antony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State. I'd like to know what you make of it so far. He's been to Israel. He's met with a number of Arab representatives. He was speaking on stage with the with the Egyptian foreign minister and the Jordanian foreign minister earlier today.
Well, he's trying to triangulate between these different sort of stakeholders and what is going on. And it's a very tricky balance. Obviously, he's already asked Israel if it would be willing to consider a humanitarian pause, and Israel has said it may under certain conditions, but Israel has flat out refused to consider a ceasefire, which many leaders in the Arab world have been calling for. Secretary of State Blinken has said he won't go there just yet, but it's also worth pointing out, as we think about all of the things Blinken is juggling right now, that there is also a fair bit of dissent within the State Department, within various U.S. government agencies. There's a petition, an open letter that's been circulating within USAID, where some staffers, hundreds of staffers, are calling for a ceasefire. So it's not like the United States is a monolith. We were also just looking at pictures of protests around the United States. This is very complicated, and I think, the United States is trying to gauge how it can calm things down as much as possible, how it can listen to what Arab leaders are saying, and how it can urge Israel behind the scenes to try and pull back, to not use vengeance as a policy, but to think more about where this is headed. What is the end game here? How do they not lose immense amounts of soft power as they look to punish Hamas?
I want to put something to you that I was putting to our senior political analyst, Marwan Bashar, a little earlier. Blinken has called on Israel to respect international law. It's highly questionable whether that's happening in the Gaza Strip right now. He is calling for pauses in the fighting, not quite a ceasefire, but humanitarian pauses. For the moment, the story's not over on that, but for the moment, that's not happening. He also says that they should be actively talking about the day after and peace talks. That also doesn't appear, at least publicly, as far as we know, to be happening. I mean, how is you were talking about the State Department not being a monolith. It's hard to believe that U.S. diplomats right now feel good about what they're achieving.
They can't be feeling good. I agree. They're looking at the same images that we are looking at. Many of them are horrified. I think there's also a situation here where for quite a while now, especially under the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, the United States has lost a fair bit of leverage to be able to shape Israeli policy. Again, I mean, this is a prime minister who has gone his own way in many respects, and not sort of given America's concerns a fair airing. He's often just done exactly what he thinks he needs to do. And so it is a question there that I imagine Secretary of State Blinken will be wondering about, in that how much leverage does he actually have in this situation? And we're seeing this play out. We're now 4 weeks into a bombardment of Gaza, a siege of Gaza. You've been mentioning the civilian toll. And the crucial thing here to keep in mind is that it is not as if the Israelis don't know that they are losing the battle for global public opinion. I think they know this. They understand that they are losing soft power around the world. They are also looking at the same images of
you
people
spoke
protesting.
I read your interview with Ehud Barak, Israel's former prime minister, and he said very clearly to you, look, we know that we have only a few weeks, I believe. He put it in terms of weeks, only a few weeks left before we completely run out of global support, which just struck me as being really candid of an assessment.
It struck me too, and it means that again, they are calculating throughout this process what they are willing to give up. And clearly, they are willing to give up a lot. If you heard that interview with Ehud Barak, who is Israel's most decorated soldier in its history, former prime minister, former defense minister, former army chief, really understands what it is like to go into Gaza, really understands what kind of effect that has on Israeli public sentiment, and then separately on global public sentiment. And he says this is a cost they are willing to bear. He says that even if they lose more people in the process, they are willing to bear that cost. And that's because in their psyche, October 7th hit them so deep, orders of magnitude bigger than 9/11 at a per capita level, that they need to be able to show Israeli people that they can keep them safe at a very fundamental level. And to do that, they are willing to go to lengths that might be difficult for the rest of the world to imagine. And they're willing to lose a lot of international support for that.
Ravi, I have to, you probably don't see what I'm seeing, but as you speak, we have seen some very impressive, I have to say, for lack of a better word, better descriptor, Israeli airstrikes on the north of the Gaza Strip. And sometimes you see them better at night, and they are continuing at a relentless pace. It's just past 11:30 in Gaza and in Israel. And there is no let-up, clearly, as we see in the Israeli bombardment. Real quick, a last one before I let you go, Ravi. You've been writing about the risk of a regional escalation. What's your assessment on that?
So there is a risk. On Friday, when Hassan Nasrallah gave a speech, this is the leader of Hezbollah, all of us were watching it very closely to see whether he would declare that Hezbollah wants to open up formally a big new front in the war. And he said he didn't go there, which in a sense was a source of some relief, I think, for watchers around the world who don't want this conflict to metastasize. However, Hezbollah and Israel, as you've been reporting, they have been exchanging fire on either side of the border. There have been missile attacks, rocket attacks. That continues, but at a very small level. And very carefully so as to not escalate the situation too much. Now, Nasrallah also said that all options are still on the table. And I think we should take him at his word, because it's very, very easy and risky what they're doing right now across the border, because all it would take is one attack that goes a little bit beyond what they were hoping for and expecting, more casualties on one side, for this to escalate very quickly. So there are several areas. There's also the Houthi rebels in Yemen. We also don't know what kind of appetite Iran might have to back its proxies further, to sort of wage war on Israel. And we don't know exactly what's on Israel's mind in terms of whether it might want to preemptively strike Hezbollah harder than it currently is. All of this is an open game. All of this is playing out as tensions are inflamed. People are watching the images you're showing on your screens, and they're angry, and justifiably so. So this really is a difficult, tricky moment. The possibility of a wider war is real. And really, I mean, one hopes that tensions can calm down, and that also the hostages can be released, which I know the Qataris are trying very hard to do.
Ravi Agrawal, editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy. You've been interviewing some really interesting voices on this war. So I certainly recommend that everybody go and read and listen to those. You're also host of FP Live. Thank you very much, Ravi. Well, we continue to watch the